Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions from YouTube and Twitter and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into as we look to wrap up the 2022 season and head into not the 2022 season, my bad, the 2021 season, and then head into the 2022 season. There is a lot to talk about, obviously, a lot of discussion on what the Browns could do to get better next year. We got this question from Pee Wee who says, do you think the Browns are going in the same trajectory as the Bears? Nagy, coach of the year in his first season, and the Bears decide to keep Trubisky for 4 seasons. And Nagy had a poor win-loss record, finally made a move to draft a rookie, but it was too late for Nagy and the GM to redeem themselves. Do you fear the same thing is happening to the Browns? There are some parallels. There are. In the right now, I think that Kevin's still a better coach than Matt Nagy. Like, I think just from a fundamental standpoint, he's a better coach. But you can see the similarities in the situation here. Also, the difference is I don't think the Bears gave Trubisky a 5th-year option. That's something that makes us a little bit different for the Browns, right? Because, we're kind of at a impasse with that 5th-year option and what we can do with it going forward. Yeah, there are some similarities, and yes, you want to avoid becoming the Chicago Bears, right? And let's look at what the Chicago Bears did, right? They had the same issue that the Cleveland Browns had, where they knew that their quarterback play had a floor that was not conducive to winning Super Bowls, right? Like, the floor got in the way of the ceiling in a major, major way with Mitchell Trubisky. So what did they do to raise that floor? Well, they traded for Nick Foles. And, that's kind of a similar situation that some Browns fans are looking at here for the quarterback situation next year, where, they want the Browns to bring in somebody to compete, like Nick Foles competed with Mitchell Trubisky, and see if that can do enough to raise the floor. Now, admittedly, it's a half measure, right? And I think it's a fallback measure if you can't find a way to upgrade. In my personal opinion, I feel like an upgrade is necessary. I feel like, to me, the floor has been too low for Baker's play for me to continue to bet viable Super Bowl level rosters on this dude not to play bad. I mean, this is the second time this has happened in his career, so I can't act like it's some kind of coincidence at this point. So to me, I would want to do something a little bit more drastic than what Chicago did, right? Where their ideal of raising the floor was, we're going to sign Allen Robinson. Well, they signed Allen Robinson before all of that, but we were going to, put some pieces around him and get a veteran to back him up, right? Like, that was the solution for the Bears. I think that's somewhere the Browns can go. I think that's a likely place that the Browns can go. In my opinion, I think that we probably need to take a more drastic step. You know what I mean? Look what Philadelphia did by getting rid of Carson Wentz, right? They're in a much better place than the Colts are right now, right? Because the Eagles actually made the playoffs with Jalen Hurts. Look what, look where the Rams are versus where they were with Jared Goff. You feel much better about that team, even though I still think they have the same problems that they're going to run into in the playoffs. You still feel better about that, right? When it comes to these situations, I think a more drastic step is what's necessary in order to avoid, falling into what the Bears fell into. Because if Matt Nagy, is he a terrible coach? I think you can make the argument he wasn't a great coach, right? I think he did some things that was not awesome. And I also think that a lot of the things that got him fired, though, are things that can happen to anybody in that kind of a situation. So, it is a interesting parallel to look at. I don't think it's a 1-to-1, but I don't think a situation needs to be exactly precisely 1-to-1 for the parallel to be valid. And I do think that parallel is valid as a, cautionary tale for the Browns in the situation they're in. You don't want to end up where the Bears ended up, where, Now they're a little bit in disarray. They don't really have stability anymore. They don't have their quarterback anymore. They've completely reset it. So, and now they still got Khalil Mack on the roster. Like, we don't know what they're going to be able to do with him because now he's getting older. Like, it's not a great spot that the Bears are in, and you don't want to put yourself in that situation holding out hope for somebody that, has demonstrated that the floor has been an issue with him, regardless of how highly you think of the ceiling. The next question comes from Mike Lee, who says, how long will we have to wait for the offseason moves to happen? Probably after the playoffs. Also, without regard to any salary cap issues, I'm curious to what teams you would think is the best fit for Baker Mayfield. All right, so offseason moves, they can happen. Like, sometimes they happen during the playoffs, but that's very rare. I think the Stafford move happened, but that doesn't happen all the time. Yeah, it's more likely going to happen in that wildfire period in between the start of the next new league year in March and the end of the Super Bowl, right? There's usually people lose their mind. There's owners meetings, I think, during that time period too, where a lot of this stuff gets done. But yeah, there's probably going to a lot of these stuff, especially the quarterback stuff, right? If any team out there is going to move on the quarterback, it's probably going to be before free agency starts. More than likely, especially for a Russell Wilson or something like that. But yeah, as far as what I think the best fit for Baker Mayfield would be, it's interesting, right? Because honestly, I thought this was the best fit for Baker Mayfield last year, right? Going into this season, the type of offense the Browns played, not how little, but the fact that they did not ask much out the quarterback position. They weren't going to have him throw the ball more than 35 times, in a system that gets the quarterback out the pocket so he could see the field better. I think this is the best kind of offense for Baker Mayfield. I don't know what other offense. I don't think he can play in a spread in the NFL just because I don't think he sees the field well enough. I think he's demonstrated he doesn't see the field well enough. He was in a spread in 2019 where he led the league. Well, if Jameis didn't throw 30 interceptions, he would have led the league in interceptions there. So I just don't know what offense he thinks is his best fit. Maybe if he goes somewhere where they're just going to force him into a system regardless of what he thinks, Sean Payton in New Orleans, maybe that might work out for him. But I don't know, man. It's interesting to me that before the season, when we looked at all of this stuff and we looked at Baker Mayfield, we all kind of expected Baker Mayfield to take a jump this year, right? Because he was going to be in the same offense for the second year in a row, and that was going to be a positive for him. And we felt like this offense fit him like a glove. And then things go left this year, and all of a sudden, this offense isn't a fit for him anymore, even though what we saw with the skill set. I mean, this is not new. When we said this offense fit Baker Mayfield, we've been saying this kind of an offense, right? The Kevin Stefanski style of offense that people are complaining about now. You can go back to 2018 where we're talking about that's the best fit for Baker Mayfield. Before Kevin Stefanski even got here, we were talking about this offense being the best fit for him. It is his second year in what everybody felt like for years with Baker would be his best fit in the NFL. I don't know if there is a better fit for him than here. But we'll see. We'll see. I think his best fit is a team that's similar to Cleveland, right? It runs a similar offense to Cleveland because we run the stuff that, he says that the numbers say he's good at. Again, this was a perfect fit for him. I don't know how the dialogue about Baker and his fit in his offense has devolved into this being a awful fit for him, because we've been saying this again since 2018, since he had that good rookie year, that this is the kind of offense you want to put Baker. It's why we hated the Freddie Kitchens offense, right? Because it wasn't this. You know what I mean? I don't know, man. Ben with a, I was about to say super chat. Ben with a question here who says, so I know we discussed the chance that Baker could come back next year if he were to be injured, we could go through the same thing again. We also saw Russell Wilson, who could definitely be on the market and get banged up. Not play well several weeks. He came back, not to mention his record is 6-8 when he started games. Are we taking a similar risk for someone like him if we were to consider signing him? All right, man. Ben, I'm just going to have to put this out there. All right, and this might seem cruel. And especially the Baker fans, this might seem cruel. But I'm not going to say this without having numbers to back up what I'm saying here. Russell Wilson's floor is about as high as Baker Mayfield's ceiling has been in his NFL. If we look at it statistically, the worst Russell Wilson year, better than the best Baker Mayfield year. Like, if you don't believe me, 2021, right? That's everybody says. Russ's worst year, not better, but on par with, right? But Russ's worst year has been this year, 14 games, right? 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in less attempts. Don't know what to tell you about that, right? Like, I hear this Russ slander coming from a portion of the fan base who are acting as if just because Russ isn't, 2013, 2014 Russell Wilson anymore, that he's no longer good. And I think this is a bit ridiculous, right? Like, Russ's floor has always been around what we have seen the best of Baker Mayfield in. And if you don't believe me, go look at the Pro Football Reference chart, go look at his career stats, and then tell me otherwise. You can also, and this is going to be real harsh to say to some people, but you can also say the same thing with Kirk Cousins if you look at his stats. Now, Kirk Cousins puts up more gaudy stats, and his stats aren't really as real as like Russ's stats are at times, because we know how Kirk Cousins, like, he kind of feasts in garbage time, right? So sometimes his stats can be a little bit inflated. I'm not saying Kirk is on the same level as Russell Wilson or anything like that. We know Russ has got it done in the most important times. But it doesn't change the fact that, again, when we're talking about floors here, Russ is in a whole different neighborhood of a floor than what we've been used to with Baker. So, no, I don't think the risk is similar if you're betting on Russ. Because, again, I'll just read it out for you guys. 2012, Russ's rookie year, 26 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. 64% completion rate. 2013, Russ's second year, 26 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. What was that? 63% completion rate, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in 16 games. So maybe that's Russ's worst year, is 2014, which was a year after he won the Super Bowl. 2015, 34 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. I think we can all agree that that was a better year than Baker's 2020. And then he had a down 2016, so 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Again, it's closer to his floor. 34 touchdowns, 11 interceptions in 2017, 35 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in 2019, 2018. 31 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in 2019, 40 touchdowns, 13 interceptions in 2020. And then again this year, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Yes, the record was not great, but the Seahawks have a litany of problems on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball that are not related to Russell Wilson. And again, Russell was hurt, man. And this is the thing I say. Russ was hurt, and he still put up those kind of numbers, right? When Baker's hurt, what are the numbers? Again, I'm not trying to pile on Baker, but if we're going to have an honest conversation about Baker Mayfield and the future of this team at quarterback, we have to be honest about what the output has been, regardless of the circumstance, because, Jimmy Garoppolo has a torn ligament in his throwing thumb. He's still putting out better games than Baker Mayfield has all season right now with that injury. Like, this is just, yes, he's injured. Yes, injuries can be an excuse to a certain point, but also other people are injured and not performing as lowly as Baker did this year. So, it kind of lessens how important I think that excuse is. This next question says, are there any wide receivers that you would want to get in free agency? Also, are there any receivers at the round 1 that we could draft? I'm not going to go into the draft thing yet because I haven't really done a ton of research into the wide receivers in this draft yet. I only have cursory looks of what I've watched during the college football season. But as far as free agency, I think Juju Smith-Schuster is somebody the Browns should look at. I know that's going to be jarring to some people, but Juju is a physical slot who can get a lot of yak, who likes to block, and that's kind of one of the needs that the Browns have right now. The next question comes from Jordan, who says, will I eat my words if Baker comes back and exceeds beyond any expectations people have set for him? Sure, whatever. I would eat my words gladly. If Baker came back and the Browns won the Super Bowl next year, I don't give a damn about, like all of like, oh, you're going to eat your words or whatever it is. But the question about right now isn't, do I think that can happen? Yeah, that could happen with Baker Mayfield. He's exhibited very erratic and volatile levels of play throughout his entire career, and that does not preclude it from going up, right? He could play better. He could also play worse. He could also play how he did this year. That's the problem, right? Am I willing to hold on to the hopes of that ceiling for Baker Mayfield, but risk the floor? That's the question. Really, like you could talk about the ceiling for Baker Mayfield all you want. You can't not acknowledge that when you bet on that ceiling, you're also betting on that floor. And that floor has ruined 2 seasons. Flat out. Next question comes from Matt Milner, who says, I know people will look at the Browns and bring in somebody like a Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins, who might be more of a short-term fix to stabilize the floor. My question is, what is the plan after that? Because ultimately, I think the Browns will want to draft a QB sometime soon that has at least a higher ceiling, and it will be in the draft. And or do they wait a year where they do have like a Trey Lance approach and get a top 10 guy? I think the best approach to this whole situation is what the Kansas City Chiefs did, right? Where they got Alex Smith in 2013, I believe, in the middle of the year. They got Alex Smith from San Francisco after Colin Kaepernick emerged, and they pretty much hung on to Alex Smith because Alex Smith was stable, right? Like, you weren't going to get great play out of him. You were concerned if you could win the Super Bowl with him, but you know that you weren't going to bottom out with Alex Smith, right? Like, you knew where the floor was with Alex Smith, and you hung with Alex Smith. You hung with him year after year after year until, it came to a point to where you saw somebody that you felt like was an undeniable prospect, and you did everything you did to get that guy. That is the model, right? Like, you want to stay at a certain level, because you always want to be competitive. And then once you get to that level and once you see an opportunity, you pounce on it. I think that's the ideal. Yes, Kirk Cousins would be a short-term fix. Yes, it would be an expensive fix for 1 year, but after that, his deal is up, and I don't think he's going to command the same type of money that he did when he was a free agent in 2017. Derek Carr doesn't cost that much money, and I don't think he would demand that much money if you were to extend him after this year. So, that's the model, right? That's the model of success, is look what Kansas City was able to do. Like, because some teams, they go from like great quarterback to great quarterback. That's not the Browns situation. The Browns are trying to raise their floor, much like Kansas City was, and then they're looking to raise their floor again in a few years, much like Kansas City did, right? That is how you kind of do it. And that's the model that I would try to follow. So, yep. The next, and remember, Patrick Mahomes was like the 10th pick in the draft. You don't need the number 1 overall pick. You know what I mean? So, in some of these drafts, there's going to be 2 or 3 guys, and if you believe in 2 or 3 of those guys, go in on them. Robert Hansen says some of the most recent reports state that Baker was told he's coming back. How certain do you think that is? Also, do you think the Browns should trade Kareem and sign Dearness? I think if you're trading Kareem in order to bring in a quarterback, yeah, that's absolutely fine. I've even advocated throwing Denzel Ward in one of them trades if you can get a Russ. As far as the reports, yes, there is a report that Baker Mayfield was told he's coming back. There were also reports that Jared Goff is going to be coming back in LA at this time. Well, when the season ended for them, right? Like they stood on that ground. Right now, they have to say that. We'll see what the future is. I think it's possible they could bring him back. I think it's certainly more possible than I did at the beginning of the week when all of this chaos started, because I was pretty just like done with the whole situation at that point. But yeah, I think it's more possible that he can come back. But I think the Browns are going to have their options open all season when it comes to upgrading that quarterback position, right? Just like they're going to have their options open when it comes to upgrading the wide receiver room, when it comes to upgrading the tight ends. They're going to have those same options open when it comes to looking at the quarterback position and deciding, do we need to upgrade here? Because, you can make the argument, right? But that's going to be it for this week's Q&A. Again, guys, thank you for asking these questions. Have a great day. Have a good night.